All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Connecticut Green Building Council Sustainability Career Showcase Green Design Team Panel. My name is Joya Cannell, and I am Vice Chair of the Connecticut Green Building Council and one of your moderators today. And as people trickle in and my partner Kai and I get the panel kicked off, we would love to hear from you in the chat. Feel free to pop in answers to the question of what is your name, what is your organization, what is your title, and what are you looking for from this event? We're always just trying to tailor our activities for what your needs are. And I'm very happy to see all of you here. This is a real labor of love. The series was inspired by the desire to more directly fulfill Connecticut Green Building Council's mission as an organization to accelerate the health sustainability of the built environment in our state by really supporting the future of our workforce. And we know that demystifying career paths and growing professional networks is really key to this. And we have a wonderful set of mentors keen to support students and emerging professionals today. So before we get started, I'd like to say a couple more words about CTGBC. We are a membership group of architects and policy experts, consultants, contractors, builders, educators, and more committed to transforming the way our towns and cities are designed and constructed through education, advocacy, and community development in the building trades. And we know that students and emerging professionals are really key to achieving these outcomes. Freshly educated in best practices, we want to make sure that we're encouraging and paving the way for the next generation's commitment to innovation and our collective future. And we know that making those inroads directly in industry are important, which is why we're here today. Finally, a bit of housekeeping. We are recording this panel and we'll make it available on our website. And in terms of participation, we invite you to please use the chat to ask questions or make comments as you think of them. Our chat will be monitored, and we will also have time for Q&A at the end of the moderated session. Please do raise your hand at the end, and we are happy to call on you to unmute yourself. And if you are having any tech issues or noticing any tech issues of ours, please also send a chat to Kai or myself, and we'll be happy to address that. We have a couple more of these showcase events coming up. This is the first in a series. We also have some coming in materials and construction on the 2nd of March. 5th of April, we have a panel on finance and development, public policies on April 19th. And please do sign up for membership and keep posted to our newsletter and social media, which we can pop links to that in the chat as well, for our in-person career summit, which will be coming up in May. And those are just some examples of the benefits of joining us with membership. You get discounted admissions, a lot of professional development opportunities, including some special discounts from International Living Future Institute. We have a number of projects in the pipeline and events that we've done to date that can help get you continuing education credits. And we're always looking for ways to grow and expand the network of leaders in the built environment in the state. So please do pop onto our website and sign up. And finally, myself and Kai. I am fortunate to be joined by Kai Starn as a co-moderator of this session. But like I said at the top of the call, my name is Joya Cannell, and I am vice chair at CTGBC. I'm also a built ecology consultant at WSP, which is a global design and engineering consulting firm. I'm a Connecticut native and love my state and my longtime community in New Haven, and I'm very happy to continue to grow that network onward and outward with all of you. And with that, Kai, I'll pass the mic to you.
Thanks, Joya, so much. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today with you. I'm Kai Starn. I chair the Connecticut Green Building Council. I also work at the employee-owned firm Stephen Winter Associates as a senior sustainability consultant. I specialize in green programs. I live in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I'm just excited to hear from our panel about their professional journey, how they got to where they are today, and insights on the careers of today and tomorrow. Next slide. And so, yeah, we're fortunate to have a number of subject matter experts today to share what they know. We'll be hearing from them in first name alphabetical order, and they're going to tell us more about themselves as they give a 5-minute or so intro, which will be followed by moderated questions and discussion. So just going to read off the names first. So first we have Kate Tosca, who's a senior lighting design and architectural associate at Newman Architects. And then we'll be hearing from Jeanette Penniman, senior architect at Patrickin Architects. Misha Semenov-Leva as a senior architect with Centerbrook Architects, followed by Paul Keys, owner of the Green Footprint, and Steve Clucky, senior consultant, sustainability consultant at Stephen Winter Associates. So let's kick it off with Kate. Over to you.
Thanks, Kai. So lighting design is a field that many people may not have heard of just yet. But I actually came to it through architecture. So I studied architecture in my undergrad program in college, and I just came across a elective class that I could take that was a lighting design studio design class, and I just fell in love with it. From there, I was able to determine that I could build a career off that. I'm still in the architecture field, but I'm focused on specifically the lighting within architectural spaces, whether that's indoor or outdoor. And just to kind of give a really brief overview of what sustainable lighting design could be. I have a few photographs of a few different projects that I've worked on over the course of my 10-year career so far. And just kind of thinking about how different lighting is needed for different tasks or different program types, so different space types in specific types of buildings or specific projects. And providing the right light for each of those tasks and the right light for each of the architectural designs is really key. And then not only thinking about the type of electric lighting, but also considering daylight and the amount of natural light that we can allow into our spaces, and how can we start to balance that out with the electric light within, whether that's through innovative controls of the electric light or shade controls of the to monitor the amount of daylight coming in, or whether it's just about ensuring that we have kind of proper contrast balance between the amount of light inside and the amount of light outside. And then also one of the other important sustainable considerations is lighting at night, whether that's interior lighting or exterior lighting, making sure that we're being considerate of the local environment, the wildlife, the other neighbors on the street, making sure that we're considering equity in our lighting at night throughout different areas. And, you know, one of the other important things to think about when we're considering lighting design in sustainability realm is how much wattage we're using. And if we can go to the next slide quickly, I can give a really quick example. Yeah, so these two images show two different lighting designs in the same space. The one on the left is showing a lighting design that has really pushed a ton of light down onto that floor. We're meeting the proper foot candle levels in the middle of the space, but the space itself starts to feel really kind of dark and kind of hard to navigate because you're really only seeing the brightness in the middle of the space. The space over on the right, we've pulled the lighting to the perimeter, started to think about the occupant of the space. How are people going to navigate? How are people going to experience this zone? And we're actually using 1/3 the watts in the image on the right than we are on the left. So just thinking about there's different ways to address the lighting design for your project, and thinking about how it's not necessarily about meeting a certain foot candle level or a certain wattage allowance, but it's also considering the occupant. You want them to feel comfortable, you want them to be healthy. And so these are just some of the things that we think about in sustainable lighting design career. One of the other things that's important to consider that I think we're going to hear from a lot of people today, as well as in some of the subsequent sessions, is transparency in procurement of the different materials and products that are going into your building. And that's another really big thing that's coming up in the lighting industry right now. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on. And there's a lot of really interesting ways that we can take our lighting designs for our different components of the built environment and make sure that they're working as good as possible for the environment and for our own well-being. I'll pass
Great.
it on to the next one.
Thanks, Kate. That's perfect. You must have a stopwatch going because you're right on time. Thanks for that. All right, so yeah, we'll turn it over to Jeanette Penniman now, Senior Architect at Patrick and Architects. Over to you, Jeanette.
Hello. So yeah, my name is Jeanette. I came to architecture from a background in environmental studies, environmental science. I did not study architecture. I guess I should say I did not major in architecture in college. Instead, I took a mix of environmental policy courses, climate science, environmental econ, some GIS mapping. So sort of a range of different courses focused on sort of more specifically environmental studies. I completely fell in love with architecture though, late in college, after taking some architectural drawing courses and particularly a sustainable design course. So I decided to go to architecture school and major, or get my master's in architecture. My first job, my first full-time job out of school, I worked for a large firm in Philadelphia called Kieran Timberlake. They focus primarily on sustainable design. That's what they're known for. And they're also known for having a really sort of unconventional practice where they have a bunch of different specialists, non-architect specialists who work in the firm. So landscape architects, building scientists, or building science people, software programmers, sort of a range of people who are not necessarily architects, but are working on architecture. And so that was a really cool sort of exposure to a variety of skill sets and sort of career trajectories you can take while still working in green design. There, I worked mostly on large university buildings where the client came to the firm with sort of a very comprehensive set of sustainability goals. So that was baked into the project from the outset. However, I was a very small cog in a big machine on a lot of those projects. And so when I returned to Connecticut in 2019, I decided to try and work for a small firm. And have been at Patrick & Architects and just learning an amazing amount ever since. We are only 10 people, which means a few different things. First, that I have my hands on sort of a few different projects at any given time of different sizes, types, and sort of goals. I also wear many different hats outside of being an architect. We all sort of work on marketing, business development, energy modeling within the firm, which is exciting. And then finally, we have to be a little bit more creative often about setting and implementing sustainability goals for projects. So on our new construction projects, it's rare that a client will come to us with sort of a, again, comprehensive set of sustainability goals. It's more common that they will come with looking to prioritize either energy efficiency or material health, occupant well-being, or sort of minimizing impact on the site. And so it's our goal to really advocate for the remainder of sort of what makes a project sustainable and build best practices into our design workflows. So we do a lot of energy modeling and daylighting analyses for all our projects, whether or not the client cares at all about that, but just as a way of informing our design and coming up with the best design. We also do a lot of renovations and retrofits. There are a lot of existing buildings that need upgrades, and you will often hear that the most sustainable building is one that is already built. So we do a range of retrofits, either sort of historic homes, but also increasingly commercial buildings, sort of converting old industrial buildings or other buildings with other uses into multifamily housing. And so that's sort of really emerged as like a key element of our sustainable design practice and our practice in general. But you have to be very, very creative in figuring out how to upgrade envelopes, upgrade systems, improve interior environmental quality when you're working with a specific set of building material already. You can go to the next slide. Just quickly, sort of a smattering of what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm first and foremost a project architect, which means I see projects through from sort of early concept to construction, which is a whole range of tasks, but specifically related to sustainability. I will do energy modeling and daylighting analyses, again, for a wide array of our projects, whether or not they're pursuing certification or whether or not the client has sort of asked for that. We'll do a lot of product selection. So looking at different options for high performance windows, mechanical systems, low embodied carbon or bio-based materials. Envelope detailing is a huge component of my job. That's sort of a critical boundary in designing a high efficiency building. And we spend a lot of time working through the sort of the details of different materials coming together. And then construction administration is another sort of really interesting and opportunity for learning and contributing to a project's sustainability. So here you see a photo from a blower door test from a passive house project we worked on, where we used smoke to try and find all the holes in the envelope. And I think probably exceeded my time. So I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thanks, Jeanette. You're right on time. You got it. Thanks for touching on the integrated design process and sharing with your background. Those are really important. All right, over to you, Misha. Take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. Well, since Jeanette already walked us through the life of well, really, I think, Jeanette, you do a lot of what I do as well, because you're in a smaller firm. You get to work on a lot of sustainability components of projects. But my role is kind of fun in that I am a senior architect at Centerbrook, so I do work on projects, doing detailing, construction documents, and all that. But I also am the sustainability coordinator for the firm. So that means that for the 60 architects who work at Centerbrook, I am in charge of making sure that we're reporting all of our numbers to the AIA for the 2030 challenge, which for anybody who isn't aware of, it's something that I think everybody who's on this call, all our firms have signed on to, which is to get to net zero buildings by 2030, which we still got a long way to go. But all of our firms are busily right now assembling all of our energy modeling data to report for the March 31st deadline. So I track performance in every project. I do often modeling or analysis. Either I will help teams do analysis or I will do it for a project that I'm on, looking at life cycle cost, life cycle analysis for a building, energy modeling, therm modeling of envelopes, all of those things that can help make a building more sustainable. We do a lot of knowledge sharing, both within the office, running our office sustainable architecture education program, trying to get all of our colleagues up to date on the latest software and information, but also sharing knowledge with the broader world, both with our clients. We do a lot of work with educational clients. So a lot of schools and museums, libraries. So often the sustainable design work that we put in is paired with programming that we then do to teach people about what that building is doing. And then also run a lot of office events around sustainability, whether that means maintaining the green roof. Right now we're doing a sustainable materials competition inside the office. So all those are things that I do under my sustainability coordinator hat. And I'll mention just briefly that I think it's been really interesting to hear others' career stories. Kind of like Jeanette, I also was between environmental and architecture things for a while. I ultimately decided to do architecture in college, so I took a lot of environmental science classes. But then in grad school, like Joya, I did the dual degree program at the Yale School of the Environment and the School of Architecture. So I got to dip my toes into both places and I'm trying to fuse those together in my current role. So next slide, just one example of a project that we're really proud of at Centerbrook. It just opened on Valentine's Day. This is the new New Canaan Library. We achieved a 90% reduction in EUI from the baseline on this project. It's all electric. It's net zero ready. It's just something that we've really put a lot of analysis and love into. And I don't have time to go into all of it, but each one of these components is something that we spent many days analyzing, including in the next slide, two of my favorite components, the daylighting analysis and the special frit that we designed to keep birds from crashing into it. And I'll mention this project as well as the next one are ones that we worked with Kate on for the lighting. So one of the great parts of this work is being able to collaborate, and it's great when people have a shared vision. You can say, okay, let's hit this lighting power density, and we do it. So this is an environmental education center that just opened in Stanford. And again, here we're designing everything from the sustainable systems to the biophilic patterns. So that's part of what I love about my job and about not having to be boxed in as a sustainability consultant alone. I love doing design. I love being an architect. But I also really love helping teams figure out how they can achieve higher and higher goals. So excited to answer some questions later. Thanks.
Thanks, Misha. Your enthusiasm is infectious as always. Appreciate it. Over to Paul.
Thanks, Kai. Yeah, so I'm going to give some hope to the non-engineers and architects in the room. I am neither, but I am an entrepreneur, and I started my company, the Green Footprint LLC, through a very long journey that got me to the place where we work on both new construction, existing buildings. A lot of the skills and a lot of the outcomes that we achieve have been mentioned prior by the prior speakers, but you know, when I'm sitting with a potential client and we're trying to figure out, like, you know, what they want to do and how they want to do it, I always start with the question of like let's start with the possibilities, right? It's not like what you've always done. I want to know if we could get you to reach, if we could get you to be aspirational and really put those aspirations into effective design and realize those outcomes at the end of the construction process. So, you know, I'd like to, you know, pose the question to the audience, like, what is your North Star? Like, what is it that you're looking at as your like highest attainable professional goal that you could hit, you know, whether it be in academics or whether it be in the employer of choice, but, you know, really kind of put those things down and think about what are the steps necessary to achieve those. So for me, I them here, accredited in ESG, environmental, social governance, and sustainability disciplines, which I've done. I just recently completed an accredited course in ESG. I thought it was something that was important, although it's not necessarily always a part of the built environment. It's certainly something that I think is going to become more and more integral to the work that we all do. Another goal of mine was to serve as a paid board member of numerous businesses. So I'm in the process of making that a reality. It's a very tall order. It's a very competitive environment, but I feel like I have the skill set necessary to advise corporations on ESG and on sustainability. And then serve my community of interest. This is something that is vitally important to me. It's really what started me in this business. I started out as a civil construction apprentice as a young man and became a journeyman. And from there, went back to school, got my degree in business management. I became a business development person for Caterpillar Construction Equipment, where I learned about RFPs, technology, finance, systems. And then when I was in college, I read a book called The Sustainable Economy that tilted me towards this industry. So that's really my trajectory. You could go to the next slide, Kai, please. So here before you is, you know, I happen to wear a lot of hats, lots and lots, and not just a generalist. I have a very deep and in-depth knowledge on a lot of these different, you know, areas of discipline. But this is something that I thought was important just to put up for the audience. You know, sustainability is a vast field, very vast, you know, so we've already discussed some of the, you know, the more, you know, common things such as energy auditors, you know, CEMs, certified energy managers, project developers, architects, engineers. But there's things like insurance, where you could work in asset risk management or a client scientist. You could work in the public sector as an administrator or as a public policy advocate. So there's just, it's such a broad and growing field that, you know, I think it's just important to know that you could start in any of these, and where you end up is, you know, largely determined by what you want to achieve. So next slide. And then my question is, you know, why are we the ones to solve the problem we identified? Well, because we're willing to heed to the call, the challenge. And so here are some folks that have identified their own career paths and their own way in the sustainable field. So I thought that'd be nice to demonstrate.
It is, Paul. Thank you for that background, that rich background. Appreciate that. Was that your last slide, Paul? Just wanna make sure
Yes.
I'm not cutting you off.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you for that. And over to our very own Steve Clucky.
Thanks, Kai. I'll give you guys the short version. So I kind of fit somewhere in between everything that you've heard so far. It took me a little while longer than some to figure out that I wanted to focus on sustainability. I started out with a Bachelor of Architecture, worked in residential architecture, and then into design build for several years. I knew during school I wasn't what one of my professors called a hot pencil, and that's somebody who can just put their pen down to a piece of paper and make it look gorgeous no matter what they do. I was never one of those guys. I was more interested in how the buildings were supposed to work. And, you know, they didn't even actually tell us in school, like, half of you are not going to be design architects. Half of you are going to write specifications. You're going to be, you know, consultants like this. You're going to get more into engineering, into construction. So, you know, everybody knows what an architect is. That's a nice thing about saying, oh, I'm going to architecture school. Oh, I'm an architect. Everybody's like, oh, I know what you do. But I think you can head in a bunch of different directions. So anyway, I realized at some point that I didn't like what I was doing, which was a high-end single family work, because my clients weren't prioritizing what I thought was important, which is sustainability, or was at that point, or as I understood it at that point. And I also kind of burnt out, to be completely honest. I pushed pretty hard to get licensed right away and did lots of great projects, but got a little ahead of myself. So I took a break. So the second little picture there is my tiny house that I built one summer back home on my dad's farm. And it was really great to be my own client. That was really what I was jonesing for, is to have the client say what he wants, and I could say back to myself, that's exactly what I want. Awesome, let's do that. And so I did. But that doesn't pay the bills. So, but at that point I decided I did not want to go back to traditional architecture. And so I took a 50% pay cut and went down to Georgia and did low-income weatherization, which involved, you know, testing and inspecting 1 or 2 houses a day, and across 5 different counties, I believe, in North Georgia, and you know, crawling in icky crawl spaces underneath double wides, or in you know, 150, 200-year-old giant house, and everything in between. And learned a lot about buildings that way. Couldn't do that forever though, so decided to focus on sustainability by working for the one company that I knew in the New York area did that. I didn't look very hard, honestly. Someone just said, why don't you apply to Stephen Winter Associates? And I said, okay. And so I got hired. And that was almost 13 years ago now. Yeah, and I am a consultant. Actually, Kai, we have the exact same titles, although we do slightly different things. Anyway, the arc of my role is very simple, and I'm about done. We start off with a kickoff meeting with a developer who's established that they want to, as you can see in my right-hand picture there, do a green/affordable multifamily building in the tri-state area, which is what we mostly support. We'll do a plan review of the architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing drawings to see if they actually meet those standards that we're trying to achieve. We do energy modeling. During construction, we do progress inspections. At the end of construction, we do final testing and inspections, verification. And between all that is lots of communication. So emails, phone calls, presentations, arguments with subs on site, all the above. So, and lots of paperwork and lots of spreadsheets. So anyway, but it is very rewarding, and that's my story.
Great, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. All right, well, thanks to the presenters for sharing. We're going to begin the Q&A portion of the program. So please use the chat to enter in your questions or make comments as you think of them. So the chat will be monitored. At first, we're going to start with some moderated questions, and then we'll follow up with your questions, and you can ask those through the moderator to the panel. All right, so as we've seen, the design team has many diverse opportunities, whether it's architecture, lighting, consulting, engineering. So Kate, what advice would you give to someone just starting out in their career, seeking a path to go down?
Yeah, I think honestly, just be curious and allow your curiosity to introduce you to people and ask questions of people that you might interact. If you're still in school and you're looking to get an internship and you're attending events or you're attending interviews, just, start asking questions of the people that you're talking to, and kind of see how they became, what they are today, how they went down their path in the AEC industry or the sustainability industry. And I think, that's how I got where I am, and that's how I got to be in a field that I think is really, really fun, but not a lot of people necessarily have heard of. If you're at a project meeting or working with, a coworker or a classmate, and they mention something that you haven't heard of before, ask about it. You never know where that might lead. It might take you down an entirely new path, and you might find something that you become even more passionate about than what you're working on now. And it can just kind of open up your world to even more in-depth sustainability endeavors or even more in-depth design endeavors. You never know where that might lead.
Cool, thanks, Kate.
Yes, thank you. And I think that comment leads really well into one of the questions that we have in the chat. We have a number of other really great questions for our moderators, but this, I think, is a great example of how these elements can apply. For example, we have a question from a panelist who's currently working at an entry-level sustainability consultant specialist coordinator role. But having started in a tangential field in marine engineering, it sounds like they're taking the steps that they can to really differentiate themselves and ground themselves in the built environment with the LEED Green Associates and planning on LEED AP. But do any of you have any recommendations as to how you've been able to really take those diverse series of experiences and help create a robust and maybe not necessarily digestible, but recognizable space for yourself as you were transitioning fields? Would love to hear more about that from anyone, because I think all of you could speak to it pretty well, having balanced multiple areas of expertise.
I'll speak to that a little bit. So I'm a big fan of transitions, actually. Early on in my professional career that had nothing to do with sustainability, folks would often ask, well, why do you only stay like in one place for like 7 to 10 years? Like, well, why is that? And my answer was, my interests are just so varied and wide, and I want to learn different things. And what ended up happening was how I got to the green footprint, and the culmination of all those experiences came together. I realized that it was through the diversity of those experiences that gave me a really unbelievable skill set to do what I currently do. So, to Stephen's point, I did weatherization for 8 years straight. That's how I got started in this business. And, from there I was, I went to a webinar, a workshop where they were talking about HUD housing, and there's, all these buildings that needed to be done. And I was like, okay, now I need to learn about buildings. So I went to a place called New Ecology, which is very similar to Stephen Winters, a nationally recognized firm that does sustainability. And I learned about operations and equipment. I learned about software. So, don't worry about so much about going off the reservation a little bit and learning other things to come back to your targeted goal.
Yeah, Paul, your slide about what is your North Star and really focusing on that really resonated with me. Even in my experience, you find something that you're interested in and you end up going to multiple, just learning as much as you can about it. And before you know it, you might not necessarily know everything, but you know enough to contribute to a team that's looking for guidance or expertise, or at least knowing where those resources are. So I love that. I love that answer to this question. And yeah, please do everybody keep those kinds of questions in mind as we continue down our question and answer section. Actually, Kai, I know that you have the next one, but I would love to direct, sort of combine this question that we have in the chat with some of our follow-up questions. So we got that question about, I see here, how to help ensure that clients budget sustainability into their projects, since they keep saying they do it in their projects regardless. This sounds like a very good question for designer, like from a design perspective. And I know we were curious to hear before folks joined, as we were chatting as a panel, where do we see the field going in the future, and how can we help accelerate innovation? I think that this question ties really into that. How do you sell sustainability to a client? And I think that's a great question, Jeanette, based on your presentation, to ask you, as well as Misha from your experience. Love to hear more thoughts on how to really develop and ensure innovation from a client perspective, and some of the directions that you're seeing that going.
Yeah, so I think maybe sort of like the cynical answer, if it's about how to sell sustainability to a client, is about really sort of identifying the benefit to them outside of sort of the social like responsibility aspect of sustainability. So I think increasingly we're recognizing that efficient and healthy interior spaces are conducive with much better outcomes for like a wide variety of occupants, whether they are in hospitals or workplaces or homes. And so I think a large part of sustainability is about making clients see how selecting healthier materials, ventilating more intelligently and efficiently is actually going to result in a much higher quality of life and much better experience in buildings for them. In terms of sort of how we budget sustainable design into our practice when our clients don't necessarily prioritize it. I think that there's just like a wide variety of tools, of software tools in particular, that synthesize really nicely with the current software tools that we already use. So it's sort of too far down a rabbit hole potentially. In our architecture firm, we use Revit for all of our design documentation, even like visualization work. And there are increasingly a number of energy modeling programs, daylighting programs that sort of plug right into that and require like a fair amount of front end work to get everybody sort of trained up in how to use them. But once people have a good grasp of how to use them, it's fairly easy to sort of fold that into your workflow without adding a tremendous amount of additional hours that you would necessarily need to sort of bill your client for. Maybe that's a little bit too in the weeds, but I don't know if Misha, you have other thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to at a firm level, what have you dedicated yourselves to? And if we know that as a firm we've said we're going to get to net zero by 2030, and we signed on to this pledge, then we need to make good on that. And part of signing on to the 2030 commitment as an architecture firm is also submitting a sustainability action plan to the AIA that details, what exactly you're doing as a firm. So our sustainability action plan really clearly spells out exactly what happens at every phase of design. And that is a promise that we make to ourselves and to our clients that doesn't incur any additional cost. So it's part of our basic services, and that's just a commitment that we've made as a firm. So we do internal energy modeling, simple box energy modeling, not super complex, but we do that at every phase of a project, and we set a benchmark, energy target and water target and all those things, not because the client necessarily wants it, but because it's important to us internally. But I agree. I mean, you need to find ways to sell the client on it. And I guess it helps that most of our clients are long-term thinking institutions. Most people that we work for are nonprofits who are running a museum for the next 100 years. They're operating a boarding school for the next, century. So they do need to think long-term. And the more we can keep that thinking sort of at the front of their mind. The other thing that really helps, again, not true for all architects. If you're working in development, then not relevant to you, but because we work mostly with nonprofits, there are always donors involved. So if you can sell something to a donor, you can say, oh, this geothermal system, it's going to be really expensive. And just tell the client right away, it's not going to be part of the project budget. Forget about including it in your cost estimate because it's going to inflate it and make it look impossible. Just have it as a separate item and say to your favorite donor, won't you pay for this geothermal system? Because for many, many years down the line, it's going to save you money annually, but you just have to make that upfront investment. And I think that's the hardest thing for clients to sort of gulp down. So for nonprofits, donors are key to that. I don't know, Joy, if you wanted me to answer some that question about where the profession is going, or do you?
Yes, yeah, I would love for you to build on that, and especially I think especially since you've spoken so well to the specific items that can lead to action, like the 2030 plan, making commitments, and then sort of backtracking from there. I would also love to hear where you see the field is going, like you mentioned, and maybe even some things that, might not be in your annual plan this year, but you're jonesing to get into your annual plan next year, to really, really push the needle on climate, water, sustainability, health.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are two things that are interesting, one after the other, sort of the client question followed by where is the field going? Because I think if you show up at any architecture conference remotely related to sustainability thinking these days, there's going to be a lot of talk about embodied carbon and a lot of talk about equity and social justice. And those are really important things that we have to address. Unfortunately, unlike energy costs, they are not things you can easily sell a client on. So if it's already going out a bit on a limb to say, oh, let's really push the EUI, the energy use intensity of your building down so your energy costs are lower, it's going to take a little bit of investment, but you'll have a better, healthier building in the end. It'll all be great. At least you can sort of sell that. But saying, let's make these materials have less carbon. Some clients are really into that, and some clients are like, okay. So that's, I think, where being a little sneaky and just saying, all right, we're just going to update our specs across the board. All of the concrete in all of our projects from here on out, we're going to have 30% fly ash or pozzolan. All of our wood, we're going to make sure it's FSC certified. Like there are steps you can take with some maybe minimal, hopefully cost impact that will sneak those things in. But I found that unless you have a client who's really into that narrative, those things where I think the profession is trying to reach, we just need to keep pushing. And the other aspect of that, the social justice and equity, I mean, there's two aspects to that, right? One is what is the project doing for equity? And again, if the client's already coming to you with the project, sometimes there are things you can do and sometimes things you can't. But in terms of material sourcing, Design for Freedom is really accelerating now. And they're an initiative out of Grace Farms that's tracking slave labor, basically, in the construction of the built environment, looking at the ways in which many metals that are used in architecture today are sourced from mines where there are kids working, where there's horrible labor conditions, indentured servitude, all these things. I think Kate touched on how the lighting industry is sort of starting to look into that now. It's very complex. It's sort of the beginning of that, but it's also something we have to be aware of. And both that and embodied carbon have a lot to do with, Steve mentioned sort of there's the design side, and then there's the writing spec side. And there's a lot of this stuff that's just written behind the scenes that often isn't even necessarily what the designer is drawing. It's like, what is this concrete? It turns out that the written spec for that concrete makes a big difference. It could save 50% of the carbon emissions. So those are things we have to keep pushing on. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. And hopefully there's legislation coming out that's going to support that as well.
Yeah, really well put. And I'm really glad you brought up design for freedom and material specification to decrease the risk of forced labor in the supply trades. I would, and at least, like, for example, in my experience, where our company is also doing our best, at least as our group, to push for specification for materials that are at a decreased risk of forced labor. And we're finding that those specs really help. We do a lot of materials vetting and really just like building out the platforms to make it easier to assess for whether or not to assess the likelihood of forced labor being a part of a material has been helpful. And in that case, that's another area where I think either risk, like if you're not going to get folks on the ethical nature, like the fact that over 50 million people across the world in 2020 were working in indentured servitude. And the majority of that, or the largest industrial contributor of that, is the supply trade, the building supply trades. If you're not going to be able to sell folks on that, then the risks, legal risks associated, will catch the stragglers. Being creative about how to push the industry. And Kate, I would love to hear your thoughts on that comment as well. I think that you were the first to bring up paying attention to where your materials are sourced from in your presentation. And we also had a question assigned to you early on as well, which I think can tie in and build off of, which is what some of your favorite means of learning and growth are in terms of conferences and job opportunities. So another loaded twofold question to you.
Yeah. So to kind of touch on the material transparency comment, I know like in the lighting industry specifically, many of the manufacturers out there have been manufacturing for 50 years. They've been doing it the same way. LEDs have come about in the last couple of decades, and a lot of those manufacturers have taken those same luminaires that they were manufacturing for the previous few decades and just translated them into LED fixtures. They're getting smaller and everything like that, but they're still using the same methods. They're still using aluminum and steel and acrylic and silicone. One of the things that people are really starting to push now is, just like we were saying, is understanding where all of those materials come from before they even get to the lighting factories. And it's really hard for some of these manufacturers that have been established for so long to kind of start to rethink their process, or to kind of like reinvent the wheel almost. There's a new lighting manufacturer out there that has a 95% biodegradable product, which is just super cool. And they went about doing that by literally saying, we're not going to start with the typical process. We're just going to start over from the beginning and rethink it. We're going to get all of our materials sourced locally. We're going to pay attention to who works at each of the factories or the plants or the businesses that are providing each of their materials. And they're really kind of digging into it, a lot of what Misha was saying before, in terms of where all of their components are coming from. And they're really starting to push that envelope, which I think is incredibly impressive in a field such as lighting, where everybody else is just like, well, let's just try to kind of manipulate a little bit of what we're doing and to try to not necessarily greenwash, but like to try to push ourselves in the right direction, but not really kind of fully as they should, I think. They're trying to figure out, but it's going a little bit slow. But I mean, to kind of turn that answer into your second question, Joya, about where I'm finding a lot of this information. I mean, conferences and events like this, I think, are a fantastic one. Every time I get an email for like some kind of a webinar or a Zoom event, if I have free time at that moment, I just plan on registering for it because I'll listen in and pay attention while I might be doing something else. Just because it's, you know, it's always interesting to hear what somebody's talking about, even if it's a field that you're not entirely sure that you know a lot about. Like being a lighting designer, I don't know a ton about paint, but I'm learning a little bit more because I'm listening into, you know, some sustainable paint presentations, you know, while I'm working on something else, or I'll go to those lunch and learns in the office. And I think one of the other ways that I've really found a lot of really good information is by attending in-person events from different industry organizations, whether that's, you know, CTGBC, Construction Institute, Cornell, like a whole bunch of different ones. Anytime I see, you know, something that's going to have a networking component, I definitely try to sign up because I learn so much at those networking hours just from talking with people about the projects that they're working on currently, challenges that they have, client arguments they've been having recently, and what they're trying to kind of convince their clients is the right thing to do. And so I think, you know, having organizations and events that you can attend and learn from, but then also taking advantage of those kind of more informal conversations that happen around those events. And that's where I learn a lot, or at least learn what I don't yet know and can start to kind of go down my own investigation path if I want to.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we're folks on the call. That's probably another unifying thread for all of the panelists and the moderators is really just the desire to learn as much as we can and let anything that strikes your interest, like let your instinct guide you of what you find important. Like if you're in the sustainability field, you're probably already keen to get your hands dirty, like Steve says. And speaking of getting your hands dirty and trying to dive in, we have a really great question about someone who is within the HVAC contracting industry on a smaller trade side and looking for ways to develop their capacity to take on bigger projects, looking into LEED and Passive House right now. But there's a very specific question of do they need an in-house engineer? What are some recommendations for those that have some base understanding and base work within the design, engineering, construction trades, but looking to push the envelope on sustainability? I think this could really come from anyone, because I feel like a lot of you have really helped to advocate for ramping up sustainability within your existing practices.
I see Paul's hand up. We'll turn it over
go for it.
to Paul. Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm actually eager to answer this question. I'm so excited that a trades person is in the showcase. So thanks for participating. It's you know, tough to break in and know where to go. So I'm going to give you direct pathway, a couple of direct pathways. So for instance, we usually tend to think of our work in building segments, so new construction and or existing buildings. So from the existing building side, residential, the weatherization programs through the Energize Connecticut umbrella are really a great way for HVAC contractors to get in and understand what are the specifications that auditors are looking for, in residential application for mechanical equipment. And then not only do you have the opportunity to be learning about what those things are, but you also have the opportunity, obviously, to perform the work associated with that. So I will make sure that we get you the information relative to getting into that pathway. And then there's the Connecticut Green Bank actually has a list of certified installers and trades and practitioners that can demonstrate the ability to do this work. And I'll give you the link as well to go ahead and follow that through. But that is another way for which you could start to get some of that work, learn about high performance, and really grow your practice that way. And then from there, go into the more heavily commercial application on larger buildings. But those are two great ways to start.
Yeah, thank you so much for those, Paul. I definitely echo the Green Bank in particular. I was also just going to say that as a small firm practitioner, we are always looking for new contractors with whom to work who are sort of buy into the same goals and sustainability goals that we do. So if there's any way that you can sort of get into spaces where there are going to be architects and just make yourself known, introduce yourself to them, hand out your card. I think there are a lot of firms, and especially small firms out there, who have like a bunch of small retrofit projects on their drafting boards, small residential projects, who are really desperate for partners in the builder side of things, who are sort of willing collaborators on some of these sustainability goals. So I don't want to tell you to like buy an expensive booth at a conference, but if you can at least go to the conference and sort of be there for the conversations, I think that's a great way too.
Thank you for mentioning that, Jeanette. Actually escaped me as well. Yeah, reach out to me directly, Chris. I'm often speccing out equipment for both new construction and existing buildings, and oftentimes I have a process by which I do a lot of the bidding and RFP procurement for those services, and I could certainly utilize your company in some of those instances.
Thank you so much. That it sounds like I hope that was helpful, Chris. It sounds like there's a lot of meat to that, and there's some good foundation to hit the ground running. Actually, with that, I want to be mindful of time. We do have a couple of other comments in the chat. We'll be sure to send those along to the presenters, including questions about how to break into this as someone who's still fresh in college looking for internships. We'll send everyone that's registered for the presentation the slide deck. It's got everyone's emails. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to utilize our LinkedIn and our social media and our calendar to join us for committee meetings where there's other great networking opportunities to folks that are looking for people to break into the field with. And I wanted to thank so much our Career Showcase sponsors that helped to make this possible. This was supposed to be up front, but yes, these are some other great areas, both for guidance on how to increase sustainability in the field, as well as career opportunities. ASSA ABLOY has really been pushing the envelope in terms of building systems and greenhouse gas tracking and reduction. They offer a number of educational opportunities of their own. And Mitsubishi Electric has been incredibly helpful for a lot of us that work in the building trades. Great organization, great company that has a lot of really wonderful electrification technologies that are helping to support passive house and LEED and low carbon buildings across the state and beyond. So thank you both to these wonderful groups that helped us support this showcase and make it possible. And then finally, thank you to you all. Again, I hope to see a number of you at our next showcase on March 22nd, also 4:30, also Wednesday virtually. And please do sign up for that newsletter, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, to hear more about our upcoming in-person event in May. And that should be a pretty accessible way to dive into some of those recommendations that have been made on by our panelists to help break into the industry and grow the sustainability of your business. And with that, have a wonderful Wednesday. Kai, thank you so much for joining with me in this, and feel free to reach out to us as well. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
Joy.
day,
Yeah,
guys.
I was just gonna say if we could somehow archive the chat because there's a lot of good links in here.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we could,
absolutely.
make that available as well. for all
Yes,
to see.
I will save it now. And be sure to, oh, I hope it's not still showing my screen. But,
That's all right. But yeah, just as you're doing that,
yeah.
yeah, if anyone on the call, feel free to reach out either through the CDGBC website or either Joy or I or both can try to field your questions if we can answer them. And thanks for joining tonight. This was very exciting, and please come back to the other series.
Thank you all.
So much, Kai and Joya. Excellent job. Great being with the other panelists. Thank you for your valuable insight.
Great.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
on the other
everyone.
side.
Thanks for the
all.
invitation.
Have a good night.
Bye.
It was great.